honorables sénateurs, sénatrices.
We're back, honorable senators.
Welcome with us for our second panel today from the CPA Canada, Madame Pamela Stier, Présidente et CEO. Bienvenue, Madame.
Pamela Stier, welcome.
Ici, Madame McEwen, on a des problèmes
Ms. McEwen is not here. We're having some communication problems. So she hasn't been able to join us yet. So, welcome. Thank you for enthusiastically accepting our invitation. And we'll be happy to hear your comments. You have 5 minutes, after which there will be questions for you. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. It's lovely to have such a warm welcome. I wish you all an excellent day. And it really is a great pleasure to be here with you today.
For the opportunity to appear before you today. This is a great opportunity for us to participate in the process. My name is Pamela Stier. I am the President and CEO of CPA Canada, and very proud to be in this role. Our organization acts in the public interest to support the accounting profession, representing Canadian CPAs nationally as well as internationally, to promote transparency in financial markets and contribute to standard setting and policy making. This work is absolutely critical as Canada faces significant demographic challenges, declining productivity, and growing fiscal demands. Un cadre financier crédible.
A credible and transparent financial framework is crucial in gaining and maintaining the confidence of Canadians, markets, and institutions.
On the priorities for the upcoming federal budget, drawing on the expertise of both our members and our staff, as well as our understanding of Canada's economic and financial landscape. We would like to draw your attention to 5 specific areas of focus. The first is modernizing Canada's taxation system. Le régime fiscal du Canada.
Canada's tax system has not been examined in depth for decades.
Urge the government to conduct a broad-based review that includes personal, corporate, and commodity taxes while ensuring early and meaningful consultation with stakeholders. Un régime fiscal modernisé.
A modernized tax system would reduce red tape, simplify government activities, stimulate productivity, thus benefiting Canadians and businesses.
Decades of advisory experience and a broad network of tax professionals, CPA Canada is well placed to play a constructive role in the review, helping to shape a modern tax system that promotes fiscal sustainability as well as growth. The second is responsible AI. AI is obviously a word of the day, transforming economies. But Canadian and Canada's governance has not kept pace with this extremely rapid change. Les codes d'application volontaire.
Voluntary application codes are no longer sufficient. We encourage the government to prepare regulatory frameworks that guarantee accountability, transparency, and oversight.
CPAs with expertise in assurance and data integrity can help ensure responsible AI adoption and innovation, as well as oversight. CPA Canada stands ready to support the AI Strategy Task Force as it nears the end of its 30-day sprint, offering the profession's trusted perspective on the governance and ethical dimensions of AI, as well as contributing to next steps and the outcomes that we need. Third, sustainability disclosure standards. The Canadian Sustainability Standards Board, of which CPA Canada is a proud leading champion of the coalition, has released Canada's inaugural sustainability disclosure standards. Les choses doivent être prises en main au palier.
The federal government needs to take things firmly in hand to foster uniform adoption and help organizations improve their information capacity.
Sustainability disclosure underpins capital market confidence, competitiveness, and climate resilience through the effective assessment of climate-related risks, and let's not forget the opportunities as well. Number 4, whistleblower protections and anti-money laundering. While Canada has strengthened its anti-money laundering efforts, whistleblowing remains underutilized. A national reporting and protection framework is needed, consistent with many parts of the rest of the world, to encourage disclosures and support law enforcement in the fight against financial crime. Les personnes ayant connaissance
People with knowledge of financial crimes need to have clear channels to point them out and to be protected by the law.
That Budget 2025 will introduce Canada's first ever national anti-fraud strategy, a whole-of-government effort to tackle sophisticated financial crimes. This marks an important step forward as this new financial crime agency unites the expertise needed to investigate complex financial crimes and recover illicit funds. As Canada prepares for its upcoming FATF review, one of the first G7 countries in this cycle, CPA Canada is proud to be a private sector co-chair of Canada's Advisory Committee on Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing, and to continue to strengthen AML practices across our profession. And number 5, productivity and trade. Canada's GDP per capita has been declining. L'élimination des obstacles du commerce interprovincial et à la mobilité de la main-d'œuvre est l'une des mesures les plus efficaces que le gouvernement puisse prendre dans l'immédiat. A government-wide productivity agenda review to redirect resources towards responsible growth will bolster resilience and prosperity. In this context, the federal government's decision to separate operating and capital expenditures through its new capital budgeting framework raises important considerations. CPA Canada is prepared to support the federal government in refining its approach to separating these expenditures by helping to define clear criteria that are critical, ensuring consistent classification, and exploring independent oversight mechanisms that reinforce public confidence. We welcome the government's commitment to full compliance with public sector accounting standards and recommend restating historical data for comparability. This will help citizens and markets clearly assess the government's fiscal position over time. Le passage au dépôt du budget.
Changing the budgetary cycle, that is, tabling a budget in the fall and presenting an economic update in spring, provides an opportunity to foster improved decision-making, effectiveness, efficiency, and planning. And once again, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to be part of this important discussion.
Thank you. That concludes.
Thank you, Mr. for the opening remark. Nous allons passer à une période de questions.
We'll now move to questions. I would remind colleagues that we each have 5 minutes to put our questions. We'll begin with Senator Marshall.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Steers, for being here today. You mentioned in your opening remarks, you made a reference to the government's new accounting policy separating operating and capital, and then you also mentioned the decision now that the budget will be tabled in the fall. And I did, when I looked at your pre-budget submission, that you do make reference to it. But I was wondering, is there any detailed opinion on those changes that are being contemplated by the federal government? Because I noticed that the C.D. Howell Institute had issued something on it, and I think there's more to come. And I know some members, or I think they're members of CPA Canada, have also had articles in some of the national media. So I was wondering, is there a detailed opinion by CPA Canada somewhere that we can have reference, or is this something that you're planning to do in the future, for example, after the budget gets tabled?
Thank you, Senator Marshall. Those are excellent questions. I think, like many things in life, the devil will be in the details. We have not yet seen the clear criteria listed by the government. So I think we do need the opportunity to see that clarity and seek that clarity before rendering any kind of opinion. I think that we are cautiously optimistic that the government, should they clearly outline the criteria, that's one thing. It needs to be consistently applied, as you would know very well in your former role. I think at that point we would love to weigh in, and indeed we are ready and available to offer our services to assist the government as they want to put this into place. I also take further heart in that the government has stated quite clearly they aren't abandoning their general reporting practices. This is going to be supplemental to that, and I think any supplemental information that helps the public and the markets more clearly understand where their funds are going and how they are being spent is very important. However, once again, I'm going to repeat, it's very important that we see the details of those criteria that must be in place and very well defined. I think that's where my cautionary tale comes in. They need to be well defined. CPA Canada would love to have the opportunity to assist in the implementation of that and or come in after the fact, and we will have something to say on that.
To see what's released by CPA Canada next week after the budget comes down. And I also noticed that in your pre-budget document that you spoke about tax reform, and that's been on your agenda for quite a while, many years. And just a question. I was trying to link it to, as you know, the Canada Revenue Agency received a scathing report from the Auditor General last week or the week before. And I'm wondering if you could just give an opinion on this. Do you think that the complexity of the Income Tax Act is partially to blame for the problems that are being experienced by the Canada Revenue Agency?
In a word, yes. I think that because there hasn't been a comprehensive review in our system in many years, that has allowed, I'm going to say, layers of different regimes, layers of different policy changes and choices to add up over time without sweeping out the old and bringing in new, more efficient means. I will also say, in my opinion, in the last few years, policy has been brought in that has not been fully thought out before being promulgated and not really amenable to operationalization, which has added to complexity. And so it has been very difficult and onerous for CRA to properly oversee, implement, and then answer questions, which I think is a big part of the government's scathing report, and rightly so. There has been so much added complexity and misunderstanding that it's very difficult for the CRA to do a proper job, and I really do feel for them. I think the criticism of the Auditor General, I think Madam Hogan's report was absolutely on point. I really value it. I think that we can do more, and we should do more and be better.
Have any more time, or will I put on second round? Second round?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Cardozo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Two questions. I'll put them to you both at the same time, if you don't mind. One is in terms of artificial intelligence. What are your concerns? Where would you like to see the regulation? In a sense, my sense is that AI has been in your industry for a while, if you think of tax filing software and stuff. So what is the level of concern you have from here onwards? And the others with regards to sustainability, do you find corporations are moving away or eschewing or following the U.S. example of admonishing people who dare to be environmentalist?
Two very different questions, Senator Cardozo. On AI, that is an area that is moving very, very rapidly. And we have seen in a very short period of time the movement from what is it, how can we use it, what is a reasonable use case in an organizational perspective, to very rapidly figuring out now, and you can see some of my colleagues, particularly in large professional firms, investing billions of dollars in the technology. The regulation, as is typical, has not kept pace. It's very difficult in a very rapidly moving environment, and because of due process, there are good reasons why regulation has not kept pace. I would say the concerns are to understand the data from which these engines are pulling, to ensure it is free from bias, to ensure it is free from hallucination, to ensure that the sources of the data that is being used are well understood and well defined, and so that you're getting an outcome that is true, that is reasonable, that is consistent, and would render a consistent response every time you ask the same question, even if you have different nuances in the way in which you ask that question. So that is where my concern lies. I believe that our profession is actually very well placed because of the discipline, the rigor, and the foundation of our profession in terms of assurance, is very well placed to assist in ensuring that those things are true, and ensuring that our system can rely on these wonderful technological tools that are very double-edged sword. They can be used for good, they can be used for ill. We are seeing both unfold in very quick time. And there is an opportunity here for Canada to regain what I think we had in terms of the nascency and the development of this technology and the tools in AI in Canada. I believe we have lost ground, and I think there's still opportunity for us to make it up in the new realm in terms of application, oversight, and governance of these systems and these tools. They are ultimately tools to make our lives better, make productivity grow, make our economy grow, and I think now is an opportunity to seize the moment, and I hope Canada does not squander it. If I may go to the second question very differently, and I know your fellow Senator Galvez is very interested in this topic as well. On sustainability, I think there is a tale of two directions. What I can tell you in talking to my colleagues internationally at the International Sustainability Standards Board is that more than half of the world's GDP has fully embraced ISSB sustainability standards, upon which the CSSB standards, which have just been issued in the last year, are based. This is a very important development, notwithstanding our cousins to the south. In Canada, we have what we call the Canadian Coalition of Champions, who worked together to create and have one of the two leading international offices based here in Canada in Montreal. That is a very big deal that the ISSB office is in Frankfurt and in Montreal right here in Canada. And then coming out of that and coming out of the Independent Review Committee on Standard Setting in Canada that CPA Canada initiated, we have also created, I would say, the local jurisdiction version of that, the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board. I think that's very important. That indicates the importance with which Canadian corporations comprising both the federal government...
You can conclude, please.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I think it's incredibly important that we move forward. I think we are influenced because we have many dual-listed companies in both the United States and Canada, but Canadian companies, pension plans, and banks are still working forward, although maybe in a different way than they were previously. But others have moved away, which is unfortunate. My apologies.
Thank you. Senator Ross, suivi du Sénateur Gignac.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being with us this morning, Ms. Steer. We have had a conversation in the past about business and tax reform. And given your advocacy for simplifying the Canadian tax system and shifting the tax mix towards more growth-friendly consumption taxes, how do you recommend balancing simplicity, equity, and competitiveness when reducing top personal and top corporate taxes and broadening the tax base? What do you think would be the most challenging in doing so?
I believe there is a way to simplify what we have such that people don't have to rely on people like, I'm not a tax accountant, people like me in order to get their taxes done because they're so complex. I think having less complexity implies there are exceptions for different groups, there are exceptions for different purposes. Some of them make sense, but I think we need to reduce the exceptions as much as possible. Improve efficiency, streamline the CRA, streamline the filing process, make those processes accessible in the meaning that everybody can do their own taxes. That should be pretty straightforward. And remove a number of the exceptions to the rules. I think thereby you could massively increase the revenues that come into the government. You would have a smaller, more streamlined CRA, and you would have a population that doesn't need to rely as much on hiring experts to figure out how to strategize in order to maximize the use of all of these exceptions that exist. I think a lot of the rules that have been put in place, as I said earlier, have created layers upon layers, and it's very difficult to wade through those layers in order to just file your simple tax return.
Those types of simplification measures would certainly help the SME community. I'm wondering if you can speak to what reforms you think would most effectively support business investment and productivity, which you named as one of your top 5 priorities. We're in a global economy. We don't want to erode our tax base, but what do you think would most effectively support investment and productivity?
This will get out of my lane somewhat. I think the duplication of regulation that exists across provinces, within provinces, and then at the federal level also compound the problem and make Canada much more difficult to invest in. So not only do you have a federal jurisdiction, you have multiple capital markets overseers, so those are regulators. Then you have bodies that are regulatory in nature, so the CPA bodies in each and every province, they're another layer. Then you have the securities commissions, they're another layer. And then you have a federal layer. There's too much red tape in Canada. And we need to make ourselves not just investable, but attractive to invest, because wherever the friction is the least is where the money will flow. And Canada has too much friction and makes it too difficult to invest.
Thank you for those very clear answers. I appreciate it. Second round, please.
Second round, thank you. Senator Gignac, suivi.
Senator Gignac, followed by Senator Dalphond.
So the new capital budgetary framework to be adopted next week, in the budget, introduce the concept of capital investment and operating spending. So you mentioned that. But capital investment look like much larger than capital spending under the public sector accounting standards. So because it's pretty clear capital spending, the CapEx. So have you been consulted? Because I know that Finance Department has conducted private consultation with some Bay Street economists. So that CPA be consulted to know if that item should be in the bucket of capital investment or the bucket of operating spending, or you have not participated to such confidential private consultation? Not yet.
Mr. Gignac, we have not been consulted, and we would be delighted to be and absolutely welcome that consultation.
Could you, capital spending under the public sector accounting, what is the annual amount that we have? Because they have a rumor going on that capital investment under the new concept could be as much as 50 billion a year. But capital spending is much lower. Could you share with us what is the annual capital spending under the public sector accounting standards?
I don't know. Je ne sais pas, parce que ce n'est pas promulgué.
I don't know because at this point this hasn't been communicated. So I don't know about elsewhere, but we do need to see the criteria first before we can understand the government's policy. At this point, we don't know what the criteria will be.
That just target operating deficit to be eliminated in 3 years, it's enough as a fiscal anchor, or we need much more than that?
Again, I would say we don't have the criteria to understand how they have separated or how they intend to separate between the capital and operating spending, so I can't make a comment on that. I would say, in general, Canada needs to get its spending house in order, although I understand we need to make significant investments.
More precise, because when we question the government if they will continue to adopt a debt to GDP ratio, they skate and not really answer the question. So debt to GDP ratio or deficit to GDP ratio forecast, or let's say target, this is what they have done in the last 30 years, to be honest, except during the pandemic. Do you believe that having only one fiscal anchor, which would be balance the operating budget in 3 years, it's enough as a fiscal anchor, or we need more than that?
Absolument pas. I think it's very important to stick to GDP, debt to GDP, and it's total debt, not just separate the two. I think combining is a very important measure of fiscal health, and one measure never tells a full story.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Sénateur Dalphond.
Thank you, Senator Dalphond, followed by Senator McKenna. Thank you, Chair.
The CPA Canada is not regulating members as such. It's more doing education, training, uniform exams for Canada, and also promoting uniform principles, accounting principles based on the international principles. So that's the introduction. That's what I understand of CPA Canada. From past experience, I had to work with your organization. To follow up a bit on the questions of Senator Gignac, as the government is embarking on the projects to separate capitalization or capital expenditures versus operating budget, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, in a recent publication, said that the proposed definition is too broad, goes away or goes astray compared to international practices, including those adopted in the UK. Is your organization going to work on that, or having a special committee that could guide us, the non-accounting in the profession, those of us that are not members of the accounting profession, to understand better what are the international guidelines, especially in the UK, for example, and how we can adjust or decide or criticize what is being proposed by the government?
We have not as yet been asked to do so. I would say we absolutely will once the criteria have been announced. I saw the PBO's announcement, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I don't have details underlying that from a place in which we could assess the goodness or the not so goodness of what the government intends. I think it will be very important work that CPA Canada will proudly undertake with its professionals and volunteers to better understand when it has been issued, what the best practices are that we see internationally to make a comparison and provide feedback.
Please agree to do it and send us a copy even if the government doesn't ask for it. Thank you. My next question is about the artificial intelligence, and you said these are kind of voluntary code or business codes by banks or by financial institutions and other institutions are not sufficient. You say that it's time for the government to step in. Could you elaborate a bit more on that? And aren't you worried about the fact that we're going to set up maybe another bureau or another agency to supervise that and try to. Isn't that up to the businesses first, especially those that are publicly traded, to put in place robust policies that protect privacy, integrity of the systems, and ensure also transparency and reporting to FinTrack when they see things that are suspicious?
I agree, Senator Dalphond, that it is important for private sector to do so, to have in place policies that identify issues that provide transparency. However, coming from a professional accounting body, consistency, transparency, materiality are all concepts that are incredibly important. And without a formal framework and enforcement, and I'm not suggesting that you absolutely need to have a new agency. It might fit. I will leave that to the government's expertise. But you absolutely need to have a level playing field, especially for publicly traded companies, and that's what the commissions help to do, the regulators. It's very important so that one can compare the efficacy and the consistency and the quality of the information that is being so presented. So I do think that is a government or a regulatory oversight role that is incredibly important.
Thank you.
Merci.
I expect that you will set up a
M'excuse,
committee or
deuxième ronde.
report.
Deuxième ronde, sénateur. Merci.
The second round, please, Senator. Thank you. Senator McKenna.
Today, I've asked about the comprehensive tax review previously at this committee, and I'm wondering if you can speak to what you think are some of the major barriers, because this has been called for a number of years. What are some of the barriers that prevent this comprehensive tax review from being undertaken, because it's been talked about for quite some time?
Thank you, Senator McAdam. I think the barrier is the complexity of the act itself. It is a very large undertaking to open something up that is so complex, especially amidst all of the priorities that this government has and what's happening beyond our borders in terms of geopolitical risk, what's happening to our economies, AI, and other things that, of course, are topical today. So that is a daunting challenge. But anything worth doing can be difficult. It is also very challenging to take a white piece of paper, essentially, and start from scratch. And that is not quite, but I think essentially what this government needs to do, because, as I referenced earlier, the layers upon layers of different regimes and policy changes over decades at this point in time has created a lot of, I'm going to use a technical term, muck that needs to be cleaned out. Keep the good, take away the things that are old, and that's difficult to do over time, but it is more than necessary and more than needed. I would say, in my opinion, that is the number one barrier, is that it is a very daunting challenge. However, many other jurisdictions throughout the world have absolutely done just that, and they have benefited thereby, both in terms of efficiency, in terms of public trust, as well as the revenues that have been generated by the jurisdictions that have undertaken that challenge.
Okay, I understand from a recent Globe and Mail article that your Vice President of Taxation is the author of a forthcoming white paper, CPA's Renew Call for a Tax Review, a Roadmap to Modernize Canada's Tax System. I'm wondering if you know when this white paper is expected?
I will say imminently, so in the next several weeks for sure. I can also tell you that this paper is actually yet the next evolution of a paper that we already created many years ago. And so we have taken it off the shelf. I am somewhat sad to say that many of the same recommendations that we had in that paper are still valid today. So the exercise was probably sadly easier than it could have otherwise been. But we are simply renewing and updating the calls that we made several years ago and continue to make every year with our pre-budget submission.
question?
30 seconds.
Okay, with regards to the Canadian Sustainability Disclosure Standards, I'm wondering, in terms of leading a coordinated national effort to adopt these standards, and as you said, they're aligned with international standards, I'm wondering, to what extent do Canadian organizations need to build the internal capacity to follow these standards? And what has to happen to sort of to move this along?
Shortly, please.
Yes, I will say that I was very disappointed publicly that our securities regulators have declined to move further on this. I think they should. Capacity building is incredibly important, not just in Canada with our developed markets, but also in the developing nations, and we are helping with the capacity building efforts. So there is quite a bit of work to do. However, many of the building blocks exist. And when you think about accounting principles and the principle of materiality, that is the most important place to start. And it's important to start. It is not going to be perfection out of the gate. And I think we need to give our companies some grace in order to start down the path, and not to forget it's all about risk management, and also the identification of opportunities that are arising in our economy because of the needs of climate change.
Thank you. Sénateur Kingston, suivi par la sénatrice Hébert.
Senator Kingston, Senator Hébert.
Talk about your second priority, responsible AI, assurance and data integrity being part of that. I'd like you to comment, if you can, on healthcare. Healthcare it spends a tremendous amount of public funds, both at the federal and provincial level. And as well, if healthcare was a country, it would be the fifth largest emitter of carbon. And so when you think about how fast AI is growing and what applications it has, both helpful and not so helpful, on the healthcare system, where would you see that some of the sort of overarching recommendations need to start in terms of the sustainable and good, with integrity, development of AI?
Thank you, Senator Kingston. I will disclose, first of all, I'm a very proud member of the Michael Garron Hospital in Toronto Community Hospital's Board of Directors. So I'm very passionate about this topic. You are absolutely correct that it is a large emitter. However, the hospital sector more broadly has done a tremendous amount of work in improving their carbon footprint over time, as well as tracking, which gets into the AI perspective. I do have and share in common with many of my colleagues in the hospital sector concern with respect to cyber vulnerability, and I realize that wasn't the nature of your question. However, it links very closely to artificial intelligence and the need to share data, both across the hospital system as well as across departments. And I know it's a conversation I've had with one of our colleagues in federal government. There are currently many prohibitions on sharing data, and this is where we have a two-edged sword in terms of the vulnerability of ensuring public health data, which is among the most vulnerable, important data aspects that we have, to ensure that it's shared so that everybody benefits, however, to ensure that it's protected at the same time. I believe that AI can be an incredible force to help good. We already know in terms of diagnostics that it is better than the human eye in terms of capturing things on a consistent basis in a much higher accuracy rate than other methods, human methods. We know that it can help prevent death in terms of recognizing signs from diagnostics that are indicating distress that the human eye does not see. Those are huge benefits that society needs and Canadian society needs. But there are also a lot of barriers, and there isn't sufficient investment, in my layman's perspective, in terms of the technological infrastructure that underlies the healthcare sector at this point in time, as well as the capacity and the permission, frankly, to share data so that that benefit can be fully utilized and realized in an efficient, productive, and effective way across the system in Canada.
Touching on the concept of one patient, one record, the electronic health record, which does exist to some degree in New Brunswick. That's actually been formed, although not in every province, but being able to share information does improve patient outcomes. So could you talk a little bit more about that piece, what we can do to ensure that all of Canada has one patient, one record that can be shared?
Senator, that's getting a little out of my lane. So I would suggest that that it's important that there are both guidelines and guideposts and guardrails to effectively secure that data. But I think it starts with the need to share that data freely. And that's not just at the hospital level itself, but it is also among federal departments. And then we can have all day, which we do not have, sir, with respect to talking about jurisdictional issues interprovincially and then federal to provincial, as well as down then to the municipal level.
Merci. Je vous demande vraiment d'être concis. Il nous reste 3.
Thank you. Please be concise because we have 3 colleagues left. Senator Hébert, followed by Senator Galvez. And then we'll conclude. Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Ms. Steer. You talked about modernizing the tax system. Yes, it has indeed been a long time that we've been talking about it. We know that the simpler a system is, the more people find it easy to be compliant. And particularly in a system where people submit their own statements, there's also a fiscal competitiveness that we need to maintain. And the modernization issue is vast. As you said, we've added tremendous numbers of layers over the years. But what do we take away? What do we keep? In your view, in practical terms, what would it take for us to say that we've successfully reformed our tax system? Well, that's also an extremely broad question. In my view, clarity, efficiency, and equity. Fairness for people, for institutions, for organizations, and also among income levels. These levels need to be clearly understood. I've had a great deal of luck in life. I'm quite happy, reasonably happy, to be paying more tax because we need to understand the levels that are beneficial for us today in Canada in 2025-26. So we would maintain the fundamental principles, and that would help us succeed. So you need to base everything on principles. 1 minute.
That you've studied some examples around the world. Do you have any international examples of countries who have contemplated and who did a regulatory reform, fiscal reform that have succeeded and that should inspire Canada in what's coming up?
So I don't want to get this wrong, but I am reasonably confident that a number of our colleagues in the Commonwealth countries, a number have successfully gone through a regime review of this kind in quite an efficient way. I believe, but this could be wrong, New Zealand and Australia come to mind, and I believe the United Kingdom as well.
Thank you. Merci, Sénatrice Galvez. Et pour conclure,
Senator Galvez, and to conclude, Senator Méville-Deschênes.
Having you today here answering our questions. And thank you for your 4 recommendations concerning the sustainability disclosure standards. Thank you so much for that, and also for supporting the disclosure of climate-related risk. It's so important. I want to give you opportunity to continue the answers you were giving to Senator Cardoso and to Senator McAdam. With respect to transparency and materiality are definitely incredibly important concepts, but I think that not the common of people understand this. So can you please elaborate on what are the consequences of not adopting these standards? You mentioned that you were very disappointed by the security regulators. Yeah, we too. I'm very disappointed. Why they are not measuring? Why the consequence? What are the consequences of not joining all the rest of our peers in adopting this type of standards?
Very briefly, Senator Galvez, it is a question of attracting capital. We talk about wanting Canada to be an attractive place to do business, an attractive place where international capital will flow in, and indeed our own pension plans have been in the news, and they are extremely well respected throughout the world, as well as being champions along with CPA Canada with respect to those standards. It is very important, therefore, to have a consistent, reliable, understandable, and comparable baseline globally from which investors can compare and understand what they are looking at to understand where the benefits are in order to invest. That is offered by the ISSB standards and now the Canadian sustainability standards. Without that, there are a number of companies that are disclosing things in their own way based on their own methods, and or they are voluntarily adopting those standards, and we are very fortunate in Canada. We do have a number of corporations who do that voluntarily. Making it more consistent across more of their peers will help the rest of the world desire and look at Canada more easily, which is very important because that takes away friction, and friction is what prevents capital from flowing. And we need that consistency across not just Canada, because Canada is only 2% of the world's global GDP. But to get bigger and to grow, we need to attract from the other 98% of the world's global GDP. The investment world is not provincial. It is not federal or across Canada. It is global. We are part of a global ecosystem, and we need to take our proud place as a leader among that system.
Merci beaucoup. Sénatrice Méville-Deschênes.
Thank you, Senator Méville-Deschênes. So basically, on the environmental issue, there is less disclosure because companies want to attract capital and they prefer to not have disclosed what they should be disclosing. I believe disclosure is important to investors, to pension funds. It's extremely important to have answers to their questions. If there are questions they have to ask, and if the information isn't readily available, that creates friction and problems. So you believe that financial markets have taken a step back. That's a political issue. In Canada, we don't have a single capital market. We have 12. And they have differences of opinion. For example, Quebec is quite progressive on sustainability, but other provinces, for example, Alberta, are more hesitant, less progressive. So these differences among provinces on sustainability exist. There's also the problem that the U.S. is a significantly large market for Canada, and many organizations operate differently in Canada and the U.S. And now we know that there are problems with sustainability in the opinion of the U.S. president. Very briefly, on the government's new accounting practice for the budget, do you believe, like the parliamentary budget officer, that Canada is moving away from international best practices? First of all, we'll have to see what the criteria are. Criteria are fundamental if we are to provide an opinion on that statement.
I think first we need the criteria to better understand. Second, I take heart, and I think it's very important that the government has stated they will continue to report as they always have. The new criteria are supplemental, so they're an additional report, which I think is helpful. So I don't think if we're remaining true to the fundamentals and continuing to report in the same way, we will not be moving further away. I'm hopeful that this will be additional helpful information for the public, for the markets, and for all of you. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. We have reached at the end of our time for this panel. Merci beaucoup pour ce témoignage.
Thank you very much for your very interesting testimony, and thank you, everyone. And before we conclude, I would like to inform senators that our next meeting will be held at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, October 28th. Thank you.